don't know about the rest of you guys, but now I need to add a trash truck ride along to my bucket list. So, thank you. One more thing I got to do. All right, thank you very much, Scott. Next up is Dwight Otwell, Senior GIS Specialist with Moffitt & Nichol. Dwight's work at Moffitt & Nichol concentrates on transportation network analysis and data management. Prior to this, Dwight worked in the public sector as a research tech in the Joint Fire Science Program, an environmental technician for NCDOT on the floodplain mapping project, and as an instructor of GIS and spatial technology at Wake Tech Community College. Dwight is going to be presenting on creating routable GIS layers for North Carolina with the NCDOT Rail Division. Dwight.
These things make me nervous, so if you guys can hear me in the back of the room, can you guys hear me all right back there? That way I don't have to stand right in front of it. Thank you very much. I think that Scott's presentation is a great segue into what I want to talk about, because we haven't actually gotten to the routing and the networking portion of our project yet. It's in our future. But I want to talk about getting the data set ready for routing. And Scott talked about cleaning up that data set was one of their major challenges. And we had some pretty complicated data sets to conflate and create. And I'd like to go over how we attacked those challenges. So let's see, make sure everything's working here. All right. As it was said, my name is Dwight Otwell. I wouldn't normally go through my bio at NC State University. I was at the College of Natural Resources for like a decade. But when I was looking up this logo yesterday, I realized they changed the name of my center out from underneath me. I used to go to the Center for Earth Observation, and now it's the Center for Geospatial Analytics, which sounds even more fancy, so I'm going to start changing my resume to match that. And right now I work for Moffitt & Nichol. It's a medium-sized, worldwide engineering firm. Does a lot of transportation, design, and analysis. And here's my contact information if you care to get in touch later and complain. All right, so today I'm going to talk about what it took to get our networks or our data sets ready for networking. Two at once. So why do we need a routable network first? What is it that North Carolina DOT Rail Division is doing that they're going to need routing networks? I'm going to briefly cover the technical aspects of how we did it. You guys know how to digitize, you know how to create attributes. I'm going to talk more about the logistics of finding out the correct attributes and creating the standards, these processes. And talk about who owns this data now. We're creating it. We're working with North Carolina DOT. North Carolina DOT has several departments. Rail Division has several departments within itself. Different people have different expertise, different authorities. So how do you go about tracking who's in charge, who has the final say on any given field, who is the one that's going to vet this data, and who's going to take the fall if it all goes wrong? Right. As Scott talked about, one of his biggest enlightenments or pleasures in working with the sanitation crew was learning about the industry that he was doing this project on. And I've had kind of the same journey with rail. I mean, I knew what trains were. I stopped for them when the train arms came down at the crossings. But until I started getting involved with the industry, I had no clue the intricacies of the safety and the planning, what the train companies do and the rail companies, what the public sector is responsible for. North Carolina Rail Division exists within NCDOT, and this is their mission statement. Basically, it boils down to, and we have one of their employees here present, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it boils down to safety and planning. So the Rail Division is in charge of the state and the road side of the safety for each crossing. So they're the ones that go about documenting how many arms are going to come down at the crossing, what kind of flashing lights and wigwags you're going to have, what alarm bells might go off. And they're also in charge of directing funding for transportation projects, rail improvements, specifically with passenger service, but they also look at freight transportation and how they can spur economic development within North Carolina. One of the responsibilities of the Rail Division is to report to the Federal Railroad Administration on a periodic basis the content. Let's see, the word I'm looking for is not coming into my head. It's on my next slide. Crossing inventory, sorry. The crossing inventory form, and I just put this up here to kind of show how complicated it is. We're sending out Rail Division employees on a constant basis, filling out this form at each crossing. How many arms are there? How many lanes? What's the name of the crossing road? Is it at grade? What's the material made for the crossing? How many tracks are there? Is there a sidewalk? Is there a greenway? There's over 100 attributes that the FRA tracks for each crossing. And it gets more complicated because different entities are responsible for reporting different portions of this inventory form. So the railroad company that operates the railroad at a particular crossing fills out part of this form and submits it. North Carolina goes and fills out a portion of this form and submits it. And the FRA is very particular about how this information is submitted. When you submit it electronically and you don't follow all of the proper formatting rules, they reject your submission in entirety. So you can go back and forth with the FRA trying to get this information submitted. Another neat little trick that they had was if you submitted in the past, they might have fixed this, an incomplete form, the blank fields would overwrite any of the existing information for that crossing. So if you were responsible for, say, the railroad portion of it, and you turned in just the state portion, all your blank fields would overwrite what the railroad had just previously submitted 6 months ago. So it was a messy data set. And this is how Moffitt & Nichol got involved with the Rail Division. Moffitt & Nichol is known for rail transportation and rail design, and we were contracted with the Rail Division to help them work on the database that tracks this inventory, among many other things. Their state authoritative rail and highway database. So, looking at what the Rail Division is responsible for, we're trying to look to the future. What kind of information is this rail data going to be used by Rail Division in the future? One of the big things is the STI, Strategic Transportation Index Initiative. Somebody help me out. The Strategic Transportation Initiative. If you've been paying attention to what the state and the DOT is doing, this has been big news. They've completely redone the way transportation funding is decided upon within the DOT. They're trying to make it data-driven and take some of the politics out of the process. DOT has in the past been notorious for political favoritism in assigning road projects. And so this Strategic Transportation Initiative is a large project or a large initiative to try to take that out of the decisions. So economic development, impact on the community, several factors are considered when ranking these projects. They'd like to be able to use their rail data and the road data that exists to properly apply for the rail projects they have in mind. You need a good data set to do that kind of analysis. So what kind of data exists currently that we can fulfill these current roles and address our future missions? The NCDOT highway information. It's top notch. So if my mouse go over here. How many people use the DOT information? It is a great website. Ever since DOT Connect came up, I got you. Oh no. Well, if that's the case, I might just I might just have to tell you guys about it. Yeah, okay. Well, you're just gonna have to take my word for it. So you're familiar with the data set, you've seen it, lots of layers, it's been highly vetted. There's been a large amount of funding available to collect all of the segments, to do all the proper attribution. Did anybody happen to see, who was it? It was, I'm on the wrong page. Tim Mulrooney. Does anybody know Tim? What's that? Didn't make it. Tim Mulrooney has just given a speech or given a presentation a little while ago about QA/QC for the NCDOT data sets. They have road arcs, road characteristics, the LRS setup, They have the NCDOT. There's a data set that includes not just the primary and secondary roads, but all the roads, including the data sets, including the Tiger data sets. More comprehensive, but less accurate. They have a great store of information if you want to do highway routing. We compare that to what we were using for the track lines before, which is the Tiger line track layer. And if you're making regional maps just for display, it can serve, but the data set is old. It was digitized at a very low resolution, so from a really high perspective, several lines exist within the data set that I'm not even sure they were ever there, but if they were, they've been gone 20 years or more. You look at the aerial photography and there's just no way those rail lines that the FRA says are there have been there anytime recently. Quick example, this is a couple main lines and a yard, and this is the original Tiger line data that was available. And this is actually pretty good for connectivity. One of the problems we found with this data set was this looks like a connected segment. They didn't know about snapping when this data set was created, so they got real close, but none of these segments link, and they're oftentimes drawn double on top of each other. Somebody come back over the same lines, digitize them, so you can select a single segment that looks like a single segment from your perspective, and you get three records returned to you. It's really messy, and it's not complete. So to do real network analysis, you have to be able to decide not only where can your trains travel, where can you park trains to get other trains through. So you need to know about capacity, and you need to know about Ys and sidings and spurs and industrial track and anything you can use to store and move your trains. So this is what the Tiger line data looked like, and this is an example of what the data set looked like when we got finished digitizing it. Much more comprehensive and connected. Besides the track layers, Rail Division also needs crossing information. The FRA on their safety website will give you a spreadsheet of every crossing within North Carolina, along with the latitude and longitude, which can be easily imported into our GIS. And we use this a lot. It has the crossing number, a bunch of attributes about each crossing, the crossing road, the type of separation. Most of the stuff that gets tracked by North Carolina is also tracked by the FRA and in this data set. As I mentioned before, North Carolina has the state authoritative rail and highway database. Did I say that right? I'm bad with my acronyms, I apologize. It tracks a lot of the same information, but it suffers from some of the same deficiencies. It's somewhat legacy. Some of the data in there comes from way back in the day. It's been ported through several different technologies, and the data fields get just drug along for the ride, so some of it's outdated. Some of it's very accurate and up to date. Some of it's not outdated, but just completely incorrect. They started taking GPS readings when they got to the crossings to input into this database. And it's better now, and I would never say anything against the current Rail Division employees, but I'm not sure that everybody knew how to use a GPS unit when they first started tracking this information. As soon as they were able to hit the record button, they got one position, marked it down, and took off. So some of these positions are kind of fanciful. A quick example, I'm sure everybody that works with WGS data is familiar with the awesome 0-0 position down here off the coast of Ghana. The FRA reported somewhere around 20,000 open and closed crossings for North Carolina. 4,000 of them are in off the coast of Africa, according to the FRA. And when I first opened this data set, I thought, that's great. You know, there's only one or two down there. Let me select those and take care of those right away. And it was 20% of our data set. And so it has no location at all. Of the ones that look good, when we finished moving them, they moved an average, Jason over there, perhaps you can help me remember, I think the average was somewhere around 1.5 miles. Yeah, for each crossing on average. So I think somewhere around 75% of the crossings were located in the general vicinity of where they needed to be. 25% of them could be counties away. We had several crossings that were more than 200 miles from their actual position. There's a lot of complexity in how a crossing is located. The numbers are issued by the FRA by request from North Carolina or the state or the railroad company when the crossing is created in order. So most of your crossing numbers going down the line are in order, unless they come back and take one out. Or if they add another one in a few years later, all of a sudden you have one that's way out of order, so you can't go on crossing number to determine where it is. Obviously, you can't go by latitude, longitude to tell where your crossing is. So then you start comparing, like, what county is it in? Does it match the crossing and the track information? You also start looking at the crossing roads to see if that matches. One of the fun things we got to do was initiate a little fuzzy logic operation to see if we can match the names that are listed in the crossing database with their supposed track and road that they cross using the North Carolina Roads database. And like I said, we ended up moving 100% of all the crossings because none of them were right where they needed to be. About a third or a quarter of them needed to be moved significantly because they weren't anywhere near where they were supposed to be, and a small handful were just randomly placed. We actually had a few that were showing up in West Virginia according to their latitude and longitude. So the crossing, I think that we need to give a lot of credit to Jason. Jason spent many hours being our crossing detective, searching down several different data sources and sometimes calling people in person and writing to the FRA to find out where these crossings are supposed to be. All right, so looking at our past uses, safety and planning, and looking at the future uses, we're going to need to do economic forecasting to fit into this STI model. We're going to need to do demographic forecasting. We're looking at a future in which rail freight traffic is supposed to go up over 100% within the next 20 years, and our freight lines are already pretty congested. This is going into an environment where passenger service is getting more and more attention. Light rail is not really an issue because they don't run on the same lines, but commuter rail will be running on these same lines, and that's going to get thrown into the mix here in the triangle within the next few years. These are all creating the needs for a routable network. The data set, as you can see, is insufficient for what the rail division was doing. They need a map of the crossing that they're going to so they can record inventory. Their locations are wrong. They came to us and said, we want you to update the track and the crossing layer so that our technicians and our employees can get to the crossings where they need to go. After looking at their use and looking at their data sets, we came back and said, this is the time for you to build a routable network. We're going to be going over each crossing and each segment of track individually. We can save a lot of time and effort in the future if you give us just a little bit of extra time right now to make sure that this network or this data set is ready to be networked. If we follow the proper rules and frameworks to get the data where it needs to be. Now, to be totally honest, I'm not a networking expert. We're going to be getting into that in the next couple years here. So we went out and did our research and hopefully find somebody to tell us how to do it. So we use the Federal Geographic Data Committee Geographic Information Framework Data Standard, Part 7B. There's a whole section devoted to rail transportation and rail infrastructure, and it details how you set up your track networks and how you set up your crossings so that it'll fit within a network routable data set, and it'll be standardized across the nation. We can get into the technicalities of the rules, but basically, for those of you that are familiar with segmenting, each link is a segment of track, and each node is a position where a train can make a change between tracks. And each node is then going to have to be defined with rules, whether it's a Y or whether it's a siding, which way a train can move, because the train can't do those sharp turns back down the Ys. So you got to make, this is a complicated set of rules that need to be built into these nodes. So I'm going to go briefly, and I have a little bit more time than I thought I did, over how we created this network. First was the track, and I'm sorry these keep popping up two at a time. I guess I got a twitchy finger. Track segmentation and digitization started back in 2005 with the interns at Rail Division. They knew they needed this data set, and so they set their GIS interns to making it. It turned out to be a much more challenging process than they anticipated, and it got handed off from one person to the next as your interns would come and go. And finally, they decided they needed somebody to take care of it full time. That's when they came to us. We digitize this based on the North Carolina Orthophotography Project. It gives us a standard data set that is North Carolina authored, so we keep it all within the family. And it gives us something to refer back to. If they say, where did this segment come from? We can tell them what year and what data set it came from. It gives us a little hiccup every now and then when we get a partner that comes back and says, well, I know there's a segment that runs from Mainline S over to that airport in Granville County. Can you just go ahead and throw that in? And we come back and say, well, it's not in the latest orthophotography that's been released yet. We can help you come up with a solution, but we can't really put it in the data set because of the way it's written and because of the standardized process. If we just started taking suggestions, then we would lose our framework. So we come back and we do updates quarterly, and as the orthophotography gets updated, we add those in. We segment. Every single segment exists between movable train points. So between Ys, between sidings and splits, anywhere a train can move from one track to another, it defines a new segment. We don't cut our segments at the crossings because the train doesn't have the option to jump off the track and move down the road at the crossing, unless we're having a really bad day, and we don't model for that. Digitizing it was pretty straightforward. The attribution got a little bit more complicated. So this is where I really started getting into learning what the rail industry was like. I enjoyed looking at trains in the past, but I had no clue how the industry operated. The reputation the rail company gets from back in the 1800s being kind of like robber barons and a little bit reticent, I think it still holds. They're very tight with their information. So we got a lot of help from Rail Division, and there's a lot of institutional knowledge there, but the rail companies themselves pledged support and came through every once in a while, but it took persistent effort, and it took some higher ups being directed to their attention to actually get any feedback from these rail companies. They're not the most. Does anybody here work for the rail industry? Besides Christian, but we work together, so I feel okay knocking them. But it was an education working with the rail companies trying to get this information. The main branches are easy to define based on previously established maps, mostly printed maps that we worked with from Rail Division and some of the rail companies, and the track charts from the main companies. CSX and Norfolk Southern are our mainline railroad companies in North Carolina. We also have a dozen or more short line railroads. Short line railroads mostly operate within the state. They're not subject to the same reporting requirements. Oftentimes their contacts, their links are dead. It's hard to get in touch with them. They don't update their crossing information as much. Short lines often have deals with Rail Division to collect their portion of the inventory form. So tracking down the owner of the short lines, the operator for the short lines, and some of the more detailed attributes that we were contracted to fill out for this rail layer was a real challenge. And this is where industry knowledge was invaluable. Because Moffitt Nickel has been involved with rail transportation for a long time, and many of our employees have come over from North Carolina Rail Division and from the railroad companies, we could use our own resources and go to other folks within different departments within our company, and they could give us a priori, is that the correct use of that term? Knowledge. They had that knowledge ready to go, and they would sit there at the printed map with us and point out which lines they knew, and we would go about our attribution in that way sometimes. And we'd go over to Rail Division and do the same thing. Hey guys, we have no clue what this line is. Do you know who operates it? How long has it been out of service? How long has it been in service? Is it even operational now? I've already gone over the crossings a little bit, but again, we have several different data sets that already exist. We have the SARA database, we have the FRA database, and we had, as Moffitt Nickel had accumulated quite a bit of crossing information in some of our previous projects. We would compare these data sets and the attributes within them against the track that they fell on top of and against the road in the road network from the DOT. And we would compare road names, we would compare number of lanes, we would look at separation, whether they were at grade or grade separated. We would look at whether they were public or private. And it was like a statistical match. Said, okay, 9 out of 10 fields match between this crossing and this piece of track and this road. And it would give us a really good idea that we had the crossing in the right spot. And even then, sometimes we had it wrong, which is why good thing we had a good QA/QC process. And one last link that I never even considered before starting to work with these rail folks are rail facilities. In the very beginning, they were looking for intermodal transportation nodes, and these were particularly tricky because depending on who you ask, you get a different definition of what a intermodal facility is. At its largest scale, it's these huge industrial operations where trucks pull up and silos and conveyor belts operate, and you move goods back and forth between freight trains and tractor trailers. Some people wanted to get a little bit more detailed, down to the loading docks on some of these industries. If you get really loose with your generalization, an intermodal facility could be anywhere where a farmer can pull up next to the track and dump his grain in a boxcar. So we spent a lot of time going back and forth with the rail division and with some of the folks in the rail industry trying to determine a suitable definition for an intermodal facility, and then track that information down for those facilities. We were able to locate a good number of them, and these red dots represent the facilities data set. After we got our intermodal locations nailed down, who operated them, what they carried, what lines they serviced, Rail Division came back and said, we'd like to expand this facilities to include more than just intermodal, and now it includes passenger service. There's a couple bus stations in there that they needed. Am I missing anything, Amy? Transload. And Amy was the one that did the big legwork on the facilities and the transmode data set. So I was really lucky to have her help there. So we have this data set. We're really sure that we know where the track is. We're pretty sure that we know where all these crossings are supposed to be. Who's in charge of making these final decisions? This is where institutional knowledge is absolutely important. You have to know the company that you're working with. And when I first started at this job at Moffitt Nickel, I was not competent for this job at all, to do this task. Now that I know who works in what division, who has what kind of knowledge, the different departments within Rail Division for safety and for planning, the guys in planning might be the ones that have the information that the guys in safety need, and vice versa. And we have to get that information back and forth. But who's in charge of that information? Who makes the final call? Clearly defined roles are very important. Documented roles. Who's in charge of which attribute? Who has the final say? What are your workflows? We need to spell them out and document them. So who does the editing? Who gets the data passed on to them to make those calls? We would do the edits in-house. We would do our own QA/QC with our own engineers, send it to different folks within the Rail Division depending on their knowledge and expertise, who would then give their approval back to us for us to integrate any changes they make to their final key point of authorization within the Rail Division, who has been designated from the very beginning as having total authority. And I can't emphasize that more than anything else, you need copious communication with your partners. This is not something that we could have done by ourselves, not a project that they could hand off to us and then we could hand back half a year or a year later and say it's complete. We're on a daily, weekly basis going over to Rail Division's office, talking to folks in the rail industry, going back and forth within our office to people that have prior rail experience, nailing down this data. And so the status right now. It might be a little bit faded for you to see, but this is where we are today, just to give us a little local flavor. And our new Union Station is going to be going in right here. Is this correct? Correct. Right across the Y from where the current station is. I actually took the train in this morning. Got to see the basis of some of our work. It was kind of neat. So we have been delivering quarterly updates for this data set for the past year. Every time new orthophotography gets released, once every year, we review the line work for that portion of the state. add or subtract any segments and reattribute as necessary. And the crossing and the facility layers are updated as needed. So when we get requests, or we get notified about errors, or we get feedback from the community, it'll happen in the next quarterly update. Most of our changes happen on the track layer. How do I go backwards? We are on the Connect NCDOT page. All three of our data layers are available. I am not mistaken in saying these presentations are going to go up on the web after this, right?
We hope so, yes.
If not, copy it down now, or if you need to do the Google search, go for NCDOT GIS and you'll pop right to it. It's available, gets updated quarterly. And one thing I really wanted to talk about, which I couldn't figure a way to shoehorn into the presentation, so I'll just tack it on at the end because I'm so excited about it, is the GeoGig data versioning. We've had several instances where we have one team member that's working on attributes for the track layer, one team member that's adding segments for a new portion of orthophotography. We've had real trouble in the past merging those data sets back together. This is something the coding community has been dealing with since there was coding, and they have a really good handle on it. GeoGig is an attempt to apply that sort of framework to geospatial data. It allows you to bring all of your data into a single repository. As you make changes, you commit to that repository and it tracks your changes. So you can revert back to any version within your repository, and you're allowed to make branches off your repository, merge them back together, and it will merge your data back together seamlessly as long as you haven't both edited the same feature. And if you have edited the same feature, it flags it and allows you to go back to make the decision to which feature you want to accept into your current data set. We haven't fully implemented this into our workflow yet, but we've been testing it for a few months, and it has it's proved really, really nice, saving us a lot of time. There's been many, many times where I've lost a couple days of work trying to merge two data sets back together when I wasn't properly keeping track of my version control. And you guys just missed the GeoGig talk next door that they were giving. We just found out about it a few minutes before it started. But keep an eye out for this. It's command line, but it's really easy to use. And that's all I got for now, unless anybody's got any questions. Yes? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The long-term maintenance, like this quarterly updates, is that going to stay with you guys, or
I didn't mean to touch on the fact that we're working with a rail division on the STI, the Strategic Transportation Initiative, and working on the rail framework for that. And we're hopeful that they will continue our contract for the updates. But right now, I think we have another year of updates. It was a 3-year contract for updates, and that will expire at the end of next year. I have expectation that the contract will continue, whether it's us or whether Rail Division picks it up themselves and hires a little bit more work, because they're doing as much work as they can right now. I'm just happy to know that we've given them a data set that will be flexible in the future. It's not just something that's going to have to be redone in the next few years, whoever picks it up. I do think that the updates will continue.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I'm sure most of you guys were astute enough to pick up on this, that you may not be routing trains anytime soon. This is really cool stuff, but this data set, for all intents and purposes, there was no statewide, I won't say there wasn't a statewide rail data set, but there might as well not have been before this work was done. This has, beyond the great routing stuff that this is going to enable Rail Division to do, this has other regional statewide implications, because economic development, you name it, this data set was sorely needed, and a lot of work was done to gain traction with the Rail Division and the work that Dwight has done with the Geographic Information Coordinating Council, because we've been working on statewide orthophotography, statewide parcels, statewide road center lines. This was just, overlooked. It's not something that everyone considers all the time. Rail, big dirty trains, tractor's always been there. No one really ever considered it. This is work that was sorely done. So I know I'm in the rail industry, so I'm very grateful for it. But you guys should download the data. Even if your county or your jurisdiction may have had accurate rail data collected through photogrammetric procedures, this may still even be an improvement over that from a segmentation standpoint and a crossing standpoint. I know some folks, Bill Egan's here, we shared a little bit of data on my railroad. from a 911 perspective, from a railroad milepost and crossing number. So it has a lot of implications, and just to have a look at it and see if you can work with it. It's good work.
Oh, and if you happen to end up working with the data set and you find anything that needs updating or correcting, we love the feedback. We want to make this data set better. So please don't hesitate to look up that email address and contact us. Or get in touch with the DOT, the contact on the webpage. They know where to find us and how to get us those requests.
I was curious, the rail crossing inventory forms you showed at the beginning,
Yes.
has that process been fixed, or if those are done, like new inventories are completed, those forms that it can feed into this database somehow?
I'd like to pass that question off to the guys that handle it on a daily basis. Has the submission process changed any? Have they gotten any more flexible in what they accept?
The FRA has changed their form as of their as a application for all railroad crossings in the country and all the stations. So it's a work in progress.
And if I'm not mistaken, please correct me, that it is possible to still submit the paper forms as well as submitting electronically?
Currently, after March, the class one railroads have been submitting a copy. Station shoreline is still
If there's no other questions, just let you know there is a social upstairs in the vendor hall at 5 to 7. So there's going to be some food and drink up there. Go show the vendors some love. They're there now, so if you want to get in there a little early. We do start at 8:30 in the morning as well. Be safe getting home. Be safe coming in. Take your time. Use your best judgment. But please join us. Thanks, guys. Of course, I don't think they have a municipal trash pickup. I think it's private. So.
Yes, she was. She was.
So I know Western North Carolina is flying this month, yeah, like anytime. So you're going to take that.
Correct. The stuff from last year just got released, so next week or so we're going to start going over that more.
I heard it took
They had this thing down.
Last time I looked, that was processed like
I know, I was expecting it at least by summer, so I guess, oh well.
they take their time.
I feel glad that we're the last ones, but I think we're going to get all the bugs worked out. And plus one.
I think my wife and I both.
I've been loving the web services they took.
Yeah, we used to host all that stuff ourselves. It's like, it's so much easier just to like,
Good to see you.